What is up, everybody? TechChucker here, and today we're going to talk about customizing your weapons. Now, if you know what I'm showing you right here, you know that this is Punisher's shotgun, and it looks terrible. And you've seen these, which are Deadpool's handguns. Somebody said that they were Desert Eagles. I'm not super up on um, weapon facts, but I took them at their word since I looked up some pictures and they looked to be pretty close. So we're going to go ahead and customize these to try to make them look a little less crappy. And here's what I'm using. It's Model Master acrylic flat black. That's all I'm going to use, at least for the initial base coat. And then I am going to use one other color, which we'll talk about when we get to that point. What you're going to need a brush, any kind of brush. This is a piece of garbage brush that I have. The one thing I probably should have done is probably snipped some of this so it's a little bit shorter. But basically you can see size comparison. It's a fairly small brush, nothing too extravagant, especially for cost. All right, so I'm just going to pour a little bit of water into one of these medicine cups just in case I need to dilute the paint. You may or may not have to. I'm probably not going to need to dilute mine much, if at all, but we'll just have it on hand just in case. And we're going to throw this white sheet of paper down so that maybe you'll be able to see this a little bit better. So one thing that I should note before you get started, it's probably a good idea to clean the pieces, and I just use a little bit of dish soap and some warm water, and then make sure that you get it rinsed really well, and then dry those pieces off so that they're completely dry before you get started. That's just going to help make sure that the paint will stick really nicely to your weapons. All right, so once you've gotten a little bit of paint on that brush, let's go ahead and grab our piece, and we're gonna go ahead and start. Pretty much you can start anywhere. It might not be a bad idea to have some sort of pliers or something that you can hang on to if it's one of those helping hands devices. I didn't prepare and I didn't have anything, but just go ahead and start gently adding that paint onto the piece. Just being careful that you try to get every little nook and cranny. If you're not able to get it in to all of the little nooks and crannies, you might dilute some of that water or that paint just a little bit with some water. Just don't overdo it. You know, maybe just dilute it just a hair. Otherwise, you can see mine is starting to run just a little bit. I might have added a little bit too much moisture in this, but we'll just see. It's not the end of the world if you don't get full coverage on the first coat. That's another thing that I think you'll want to take note of is you don't have to get full coverage for the first coat, because what's going to wind up happening then is you're going to wind up getting some dripping potentially, and then that's just not going to look good, or it's going to be too thick and it's going to dry weird. That, you know, there's nothing wrong with having to do an additional coat, which more than likely you should have maybe at least two coats is probably what you're going to need. All right, so we're going to speed this up so that you do not have to watch the entire process, because it can take, you know, take your time. All right, so this is where having a little tool to hold it might be helpful, because you can see I had to leave the little tip unpainted so that I could hold it without getting smudge marks all over. I'll come back to that and paint the rest. But let's take a look, or let's get started with the Deadpool handgun. And basically the exact same thing. We're just gonna lightly apply that paint throughout. This gun has a lot less nooks and crannies, so it's a little bit easier and it goes a lot quicker. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and set this down to dry. But let's get this other one painted up as well before we start on the painting the barrels that I missed, because we'll want those to dry. All right, so one thing to note, the thinner your coats of paint, the faster they will dry, so that then you can pick them up and either add your second coat or finish up the spot that you were hanging on to. I think this it probably minus the if I didn't speed it up, it probably would have been 5 to 10 minutes, and it's dry enough to hang on to. But I know a lot of people will wear rubber gloves just to keep the oils from your fingers from kind of essentially it mixes with the paint in it and it can cause some issues. So you might consider wearing some latex gloves of some sort. All right, so let's go ahead and let these dry. I'm probably going to give them about, I don't know, maybe a half an hour to dry, and then we'll take another look at these, and we might throw a little bit of gunmetal gray on the handguns. All right, before we get too far into this, let's see if we can show you what these things look like now that they're dry. Um, this, to me, this looks way, way better than that boring gray, plasticky look that we get with the actual figure out of the box. I don't know. You could just leave it like this, and it would be uh, 1,000 times better than what you started with. But we're not gonna end with just this. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit of pizzazz to this. So I'm just using this cheapo folk art. It's a gunmetal gray. Really probably should be using more of that, the same brand. I forget what it is now, the Master Arts or whatever that is. But this is what I had available, and we're not going to be putting a whole heck of a lot on there. So we're going to give it a shot. I do have a slightly smaller brush that I'm going to use. We'll see if I can just pull a little bit out of. I might have to squeeze a little bit out. All right, so I don't need very much of this at all because these are very small pieces. But I'm just going to get a little bit on my brush, and then we're going to just do some standard dry brushing, just like with the dioramas, just in a smaller scale. And I'm going to try and get a lot less on my brush because I just want to have a real subtle look. Now this brush, I should also trim these bristles just a little bit. I do feel that it's a little bit too long, but we'll just give it a shot and see. All right, so carefully, we're just going to lightly dry brush that silver or that gunmetal gray onto the gun, just to give it a little extra, look and feel, to maybe give it a little more realism look. Now, there are other things that you could certainly do. You could choose to, some guns are two-tone where they're black and then they have a gunmetal where it looks like they use two different types of metal. I'm not going to do that with these, at least not for the video. I'm not going to. I may do that later. We'll see. But basically, just go ahead and this one, again, this is going to be a slow process. You don't want to rush this. You don't need to rush it. Take as long as you need and put very, very, very light coats on. Okay, let's do a quick side-by-side comparison. Let me get this focused for you. Hopefully, you'll be able to tell which one I added the gunmetal gray to and which one is just black. This one, the one which would be on your right, is the one that I added the gunmetal gray. I'm not having very good luck with my lighting, but hopefully you can see that. And I think in real life, it looks so much better than even just the black. But even the black looks really, really good compared to the original look. And that really, in a nutshell, is all you got to do. There's not a whole heck of a lot to that needs to be done to make these things look 100 times better than when they came out of the package. I just wish that Hasbro would, make the effort to make these things look just a little bit better, because it doesn't take much paint, it doesn't take much effort. Definitely wouldn't take very much effort from them. They've got all the tooling to be able to do it. So hopefully this tutorial was helpful, and maybe you can make some of your weapons look a little less cheesy. Alright, until next time, I'll see you later.